see you if you get a chance to watch this today. And just wanted to invite you in because we're doing some interesting things on today's podcast. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a talk on compounding and how that might be useful in our lives and whatnot. So just to get the ball rolling, I'm giving everybody a few seconds to get in here. So I know there are folks getting ready to stream in. I still have the 30-minute cutoff on locals. So as you join, I do encourage you to consider YouTube instead, just because of the cutoff, until we get to a point where we have enough folks actually out here doing this, joining, that we can maintain the locals stream until the 1 hour mark, which is usually, I tend to go a little over, a little talkative sometimes. But yeah, it's good to have that backup, knowing you can hop off and jump onto locals, or jump off of locals and jump onto YouTube as an alternative. So, today, like I said, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Sometimes I do like a whole bunch of news and links and things like that. But over the past couple of days, I've been thinking about a number of things. And let me just kill my background noise. There we go. I don't, let me know how the audio is on your end. All seems good. Good. All right. And yeah, I agree. The chat is a little bit, the chat tends to be a little bit slower in locals, or maybe it's not that way. It's the other way. It's a little bit slower on YouTube. I'm not sure. I'm going to put locals up in the background here just so I can see your, the fun chat that you guys tend to put out. But let me make sure it's also muted. Good. Yeah. Otherwise we get all kinds of crazy echo. So if that comes up, let me know. I am keeping an eye on the chats as usual, but just in case, wanted to make sure that I have that going on in the background. So like I said, today I wanted to do something. Over the weekend, I had this inspiration, and I did something related to science fiction. And it was really just looking at various science fiction authors and getting a feel for, where our future is going, the optimistic view of our future anyways, and seeing if we can take advantage of getting the best out of our lives in this weird kind of unforeseen, crazy world that we're in right now. And I say unforeseen because when I was a kid, I had no idea we were going to be in this kind of a situation. And it's very bizarre. It doesn't feel that weird because, you look outside and it's still a sunny day. It's still the planet we know. But the minute you go in here and you look at the internet and you start talking about or looking at all of these different things that are possible out there, it's quite interesting what comes out. So a lot of what I have been trying to digest is how to better talk about and better explain some of the things that we hear. Like, we go out and kind of, you can see this little slide deck that I'm looking at here. It's kind of real time with you that I'm looking at this, because part of what I'm trying to coalesce are three different sources. One is something I wrote directly. And the second one has to do with some of the things that I saw from an article perspective this morning, and goes back to something that I listened to with the Moonshots podcast. And one of the things that most people, at least for me, it's not always intuitively obvious how or when or where we can suddenly shift into an exponential growth mode as individuals. And I've always been able to picture things and make things happen in my life that's a, just I got kind of pushed mentally in the right direction when I was very young. My father was a very curious and very inquisitive person, and also really, really, really smart. Not so much that he had some limitations. He had dyslexia, and his ability to absorb knowledge in certain formats was very difficult. But you put his hands on something, if he put his hands on something and he was able to touch it, he could fashion or create something out of nothing all the time. I mean, I mean, the contraptions weren't always finished products that you would see out there in the world, but they were brilliant. I mean, some of the things I remember, he was doing a part-time gig, probably when I was 12 or 13. We were both working at a restaurant together, and they were trying to figure out. They wanted him to get condense all the ketchup bottles. So he built a rack and got 6 chopsticks and put the chopsticks into the ketchup bottles, put the ketchup bottles upside down on the chopsticks. And the reason it would work so well without having to dilute the ketchup in any way, the chopsticks worked like wicks, pulling all the ketchup down and then funneling it down into one empty bottle. And he was able to get all of that together to, just fashion this out of nothing, literally like a piece of cardboard and a couple of chopsticks, so that he could walk away from it and come back and it was done. And that kind of brilliance that he had was the kind of inspiration that I had for my learning and my career and things like that. And so you think about it, he could have sat there with a bottle on top of a bottle and waited. And it was Heinz ketchup. So if those of you who know Heinz ketchup, you know that is, they even have a song, Anticipation. It was kind of, he would have been fun on Shark Tank, my dad. But that perspective that he had, where if he could put his hands on something, he could instantly just fashion something out of nothing. And, I haven't gone down quite the same path from a physicality perspective. I still do a lot of that. I mean, I do 3D printing, and I attempt to fashion things so that I can use them in my own world. As a matter of fact, later today, I'm heading up to Home Depot. I have a rack-mounted battery backup for my systems, my computer systems, and I want to make sure that they're all able to be used in a way that make sure that I can use it, but on my desk. And the problem is when you have a whole bunch of systems and compute, I've got multiple computers tied to my desktop, and I have 4 monitors in front of me. And in order for me to power all of that and not lose it, I have to have this battery backup that it's a full-blown server rack battery backup. So it weighs 70, 80 pounds. It's huge. It's heavy. My desk is a standing desk. So if I put it over here next to me, I have to make sure the wires don't get caught up on anything or the whole power goes out, So there's all of these little issues that I have to deal with. So I'm going to fashion some kind of a mount underneath my desk to put this thing on so that it stays with the desk, so that when I raise and lower the desk, I don't have to worry about the right monitor losing its power, or, battery backup on my laptop's no big deal. It has a battery backup, but my soundboard, things like that, all of that would just go away if I decided to shift into a standing mode. And, so anyways, I'm taking you into what happens whenever you see a problem, and it's the brain instantly going into action, springing into action, saying, hey, how can I fix this? How can I make that work? And that whole concept of being able to do that, that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Now, I'm going to pause there because call that my introduction, long-winded, typical. But instead, what I'm going to jump over to is my new little coffee litany that I have at the moment. And we're going to do the second sip, because the Scott Adams world does the simultaneous sip. And I love that, but I also want to leave it where it belongs, which is in their hands. and instead have my own. And this is mine. So in order to enjoy today, all you need is a pen or a mouse or a tablet, a computer, brain, and a coffee cup. Fill them with your favorite thoughts. I like positive ones. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the creative thought of the day, the saucer full of secrets, and a second sip. It happens now. Go. So that's my my alternative to the Scott Adams litany, which I still love. You know, it's the same concept, but in my case, what I'm really thinking is I'm like throwing a little bit of gas, you call it gas into the engine for the brain, or a little bit of a plug for your power system. You know, speaking of battery backup. Yeah, and Barry, I'll probably do a whole series this week. As I said at the beginning of the week, I started with that sci-fi thing, and then yesterday I dove deep into Claudebot, and I came up with the concept of what I'm going to talk about today between Sunday and Monday, and it really, a big piece of it is this compounding thing that I'm going to talk about. But the garden element, I'll probably do a whole bunch of episodes on that, and I may do those recorded because I'm going to have to go outside to do a lot of that. I may not be able to do the full stream that I'm doing right now. The stream kind of requires me to be tied to a desktop or whatever. So with that in mind, I'll go into what we're starting to talk about this week, and I do make you a springtime promise that I will do the gardening. My intention there is to actually build an automated gardening setup. So we'll definitely head down that path. So today, a little bit of the area that I wanted to talk about was, so when you are thinking about, trying to take advantage of this AI universe that we're in, this AI future that we're heading towards, AI, robotics, all of these things. And in order for us to transition from an individual contributor, an individual who does a task or a set of tasks that are our workflow in a business, we need to be able to figure out, well, how am I going to leverage AI in that, right? And the very first thing that occurs to us, we've been exposed to the chats and the chat GPTs and things like that. And, it does have kind of a compounding effect in our ability to execute, but it doesn't really have the level, the 10x level that is really going to be common in the future. And I'm going to be exploring this deck with you. It's not, like I said, I just created this, I used AI to create this, and we're going to step through it. I'm familiar with everything that's going to be in it because I've already read and written most of the sources, but how it's going to be presented, so this is actually an example. Today's stream is an example of a real-time leveraging of AI. And what I did to leverage this was, first off, coming up with the idea. And then when I saw the idea, how do I kind of get the feedback loop going so that I can make it grow and make it build? And then come up with something useful enough that it would be interesting to talk about. Now, one of the things that I always do in a creative process is I try and smash ideas together, because one idea is great, but generally speaking, I always find that it's like you have to come at things from different perspectives in order to really get the compounding effect that I want to talk about today. And it extrapolates when you take an idea. When you go back to the sci-fi discussion that I had on Sunday, I was talking about Stephen Donaldson explaining his creative process where two ideas smashing together. It wasn't that he necessarily chose to smash together two ideas. He had two ideas that occurred to him at the same moment, apparently in a restroom, when he saw a bottle of Lysol and the container was green, And the reason for the bottle of Lysol was to eliminate foul odors, right? And this all came into his mind at the very moment that it sparked a 6-book series, and each book has like 350 pages. I mean, it's a super dense set of novels, the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. So I picked up that technique, and I'm going to say that was probably I was exposed to it when I was 12 or 13. As you know, that's when I read the first book. But the technique of smashing these things together, having that illustrated, was probably somewhere in the early 2000s. And the reason, there's a huge gap there because it was 20 years prior that I read the books. And then I followed what he called the slow interview. He had a little questionnaire where he interacted with his fan base online. And that's where he explained this creative process. Now, when I saw that and found that, yeah, no, it is obnoxious when we lose power right in the middle of things. But when I saw this, I started to recognize that in my career, I had these like things that when I smashed them together, they created something new. So, I had a physical security career and then a cybersecurity career. And when you smash them together, that becomes the IoT world, Internet of Things world, where you have to secure the physical device as well as the cyber device and all of that. So that kind of smashing together is kind of a process that I've been doing for a long time. And I came into this perspective with the universal engine idea of compounding. And that's going to weave through this entire thing. So that's the document I wrote as the baseline. And then I came across 2 articles this morning that further sparked this element. And this is leveling up your coding capabilities. And we're not going to get into coding, so don't worry. But we're going to talk a little bit about the mindsets around coding, which is very helpful when you want to think about how to leverage AI. And then, of course, the concept of the end of all apps. So I took these 3 concepts, smashed them all together. And that's really what we're going to get into over here. Now, one of the simple things that we have to understand is we all have a lifespan, finite amount of time on this planet, finite amount of nutrients in our, what we can consume, finite amount of energy that we can work with. So, probably the negative for us is the neural atrophy when you don't use your brain, and the problem that AI presents us, which is the minute you have something that can do something complicated, you tend to use it instead of using your brain because it becomes a crutch. And what we don't want is to make the mistake of allowing AI to become such a crutch that we actually fail to take advantage of or improve our ability to function when we can. And by the way, I just remembered I didn't have my other lights on. So the ability to improve your world and improve your brain requires you to not enable your brain with crutches that prevent it from actually growing. I mean, if you could just imagine the concept of a child, and the very first thing you do is stick crutches under their arms and say, you can't walk normally, you have to use crutches. If that was the case, if you forced that and made that the reality, the child's legs would wither. They wouldn't be strong enough in general to carry out the same kind of tasks that somebody who walks only on their own 2 feet could do. And that's the concept of what's happening to so many of us with social media, YouTube, and AI. So that's this, we have to make sure that we don't atrophy at an exponential rate and instead stay on the side of compounding. So, when you have anything that's challenging, if you actually are going into using AI, the atrophy side of things, you will allow your brain to your brain is an efficiency engine. And if it doesn't have to do something, it won't. So if you've got an AI to make your life easy, you're just going to sit back unless you choose to not allow that to happen. Now, in addition to just the concept of your brain will take it easy, because it takes a lot of energy to think and a lot of energy to really intrinsically motivate yourself and inspire yourself on things that you want to do. So if you are not if you're not using your brain, it will atrophy. And so the big thing is to make sure that you challenge yourself, but you also give yourself the silence to allow your brain to challenge itself, so that it has its own internal feedback loop to keep growing. Now, you can't totally eliminate the AIs and things like that, because they are definitely going to have a negative impact. You miss out on the exponential growth side if you don't engage with AI, but you can't allow it to take over functions of your brain without some level of acknowledgement of what you're doing and knowing you're placing that brain power in that hand of the AI. So in this case, one of the things when you talk about what we do, what we deal with every day between social media and all of the different things that we do, our brain, in order to context switch from one topic to another, it takes a lot of effort. Now, I'll give you a big real world example of a context switch. And that's not like a 15-minute thing or a 5-minute thing, but a lifetime level thing. Okay. When I told you earlier on that I had transitioned from a physical security career to an IT security career, there's a big gap there in knowledge. There's, on one side, you have, I would call it like entry level. I use that term, I said before, knee deep knowledge, as and neck deep is like as high as you can get. And then if it's over your head, it's beyond you. So we don't, yes. And that's exactly what I see, that the logic is not taught as a skill as effectively as it should be in our society. And I'm going to bring you guys over here so you're in the conversation. So, and the other thing is I'll keep the other one in the background in case somebody's chiming in from YouTube. This is the locals chat on the top left corner, by the way, just for anybody who's curious. And if you're on locals, obviously the beauty of the locals chat is you can have thumbnails in here. So all I ask is please keep it rated G. And I'm trying to stay away from anything that I don't want to have to cut it out of the video later or anything. So anyways, context switching. I just experienced it, right? I just did a context switch coming off of this topic to shift over to a conversation, which is fine, and I want to keep doing that. So don't think I'm telling you to stop communicating that with me. But we need to be aware of those context switches, and the depth of knowledge that I had in the physical security industry was nowhere near the depth of knowledge I needed on the IT side, because I didn't have the software I didn't have as much of the software background in the physical security realm from a practice standpoint as I needed when I got into the IT side. So I was behind a lot of my peers in the cybersecurity industry at that time. I was much older than they were, without as much experience. So it took me, a little bit longer to get to the point where I was caught up and felt like I was able to contribute successfully. That period of time is the context switch. The being able to contribute successfully was the pain part. And that's the exact same problem we have on the very small scale. It's the distractions around us, right? You get a jingle on your phone and you get sucked into a conversation in a chat, not a chat, but like social media. And then you go into watching videos and things like that. And you think, hey, I've got, I'm learning something. And one of the things that came out of the articles that I read this morning that I thought was kind of interesting is when you watch a video, you get a dopamine hit because it makes you think you're doing something. You might be picking up a few things from a learning perspective, but the act of watching the video makes you feel like you did something. But the actual net end result, zero. You didn't do anything. You just sat back and listened. And if you don't take the time to somehow file the information you learned away, take notes, and put it into some kind of format that you can use later, all of that context, all of that knowledge that's given to you during that video can be lost and just mixed up in the jumble and the sea of all of the other things that you're going to watch the same day or in the next 10 days, right? So, yeah, and I agree, Wolf. It's not the concept of coding in this case is not really where I want to go. It has more to do with the understanding the processes. So when I was in the physical security world, when I did a survey or when I did an audit of a company to talk about their physical security, I walked around the building. I looked at every single door, and the problem there was there was a certain amount of cost for every single door that we would secure and put a camera on every single door to visually survey it, and that cost was rather high. So an access control system for a small to medium-sized building, even like a condo size office where you've got only two doors, an in and an out, and then like a couple of spots internally, could cost $20,000 to $50,000 just for like the equivalent of a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartment, right? Sounds weird, but it's true. And when you get to the larger buildings, it's 50, 100,000. And I mentioned that securing all of the physical sites for, I think it was DHL and Deutsche Bank was a $50 million contract. I mean, it was massive, right? But what was the problem? There was a finite resource, money, combined with a rare, difficult thing to get and install, the physical security controls. So as a result, what did they do? They said, yeah, we only want the front and the back door of each building and a couple of cameras on that and limited internal access control. Now, if you think about Star Trek, okay, you think about walking around the Enterprise, every single door on the ship is access controlled. Why? Ultimately, you would access control every single door. You don't let anybody in a room that you don't want to go in there. But what limits that in today's world? Cost. It's too expensive to put the materials on one door and manage all of the connections and everything like that and get everything working. It's way too expensive in a ground-based current system because the cost of everything is exponentially high and it's cost prohibitive. But in a world like Star Trek, where there is abundance, they have this replicator technology that you can have anything you need at a moment's notice, means that you can have access control on every single door throughout every single part of the ship and know exactly where anybody is at any given time without a problem. So if the ship gets hit and is damaged, you know where you can have a casualty report in a split second. So that kind of element there was a very strong limiting factor to how much access control I could apply in a small building. Going to IT, I could access control everything because it's so cheap to put access control on a website, a desktop, an application. You put access control everywhere because it's nothing but redeploying software. So I had to shift my thinking from one to the other. And it's a paradigm shift. It's a mental model that you have to be able to change in order to move from one discipline to another in that manner. And also the concept that, you would only quote 10 doors because you knew that's all your customer could afford if you were doing a building now with the technologies that we have at our disposal. But in a world like Star Trek, in a universe like Star Trek, where you had that ability to have a replicator that made it free to do every single door, of course you would do every door and you wouldn't even think about it. And as a matter of fact, you wouldn't even quote it. You would just do it because it was there to be done. You'd have all the materials you need to just dynamically build it, right? So all of this stuff, and thank you, Barry, 30-minute mark for anybody still on locals. If you want to merge over to YouTube now, that would be your best bet because we're going to lose we're going to lose that channel because of the timing. for the more people join us on locals and sign up for the locals community on the second sip, the quicker we can get to where that doesn't happen. So for those of you who watch this after, you'll be able to see that. And it's interesting. But this is the first time I've actually just visually seen the stream die right here. Now I'm going to try something because I haven't tried this before. Nope, never mind. I was wondering if there's a way that I could potentially kick it and make it come back on, but unfortunately, once it's done, it's done. So here we are. Oh, very nice. Glad to see. So it looks like more of you are migrating over to YouTube. Wonderful. And we can move on a little bit with where we're at. But the main thing that I was trying to get at is that there's always a limitation to how you can grow exponentially because of the mindset that you have and the paradigm that you're working in. And the physical security industry had a mindset that locked us into, it was a paradigm, not a mindset. It was the physical aspect of it where costs became prohibitive to move into the IT world where you could secure everything and easily not have to think about it. And that is very similar to your brain. What you let into your brain, how much you feed it, is actually not the panacea. It's not the place to go. It's what rare moments you give it to think, and being able to allow it to have the widest possible aperture to spark neurons. So let's move forward into this a little bit more. So in the typical world, all of us who've ever worked have had some level of ability to execute, and we tend to do workflows that are very linear. And, I'm not saying that there aren't branching workflows with lots of yes-no choices, but in reality, it's having an intent to do one thing, and at the other end, being able to execute on that one thing, which is maybe it's collect money from somebody, and you might have to jump through a whole bunch of different hoops with the yes-no workflow that takes you through, do they have this kind of account? Do they have that kind of account? And that whole workflow process, it's typically, it's actually a linear execution. When you get into being able to work with an agent, you have the ability to potentially 10x that. And the first one is you can 1x it. If you know your workflow exceptionally well, and then you build that workflow into an agent, you can manage that one agent. So you can have it do one thing for you and forget about it, and it'll go do it and execute it and come back. And as long as you got it well defined and the intent was set up properly with the known output of what you're trying to accomplish, that agent will be able to execute that. And then we, as people, need to be able to do what Star Trek would do with the replicator and say, if I've got one agent that can do that, I can copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Now I've got 4 or 5 agents that can do the same thing. Ultimately, there's probably an upper limit to how many we as agent controllers, agent wranglers can manage. But there's a potential for us to maybe 10x or 100x what we're doing if we have these clearly defined workflows. And instead of having to process one at a time, we can process 10 at a time using an agent. And then there's this perspective of the end of apps. The idea behind this is using a code-based item, a text-based instruction. So being able to go with a pure text-based instruction eliminates the framework that we build around ourselves when we use programs. So I've been saying this for probably a decade or two, which is if you look at tools like SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, they're gone, Salesforce.com, and ServiceNow, these tools are very large expert systems that are designed in a way that allow us to work through a process that's defined. And our choices, the yes-no choices, 99% of the time are dictated by the application. The application is saying, it's got maybe some dumb requirements that make you make choices simply because you have to put something in a certain format in order for the tool to work. And because of that, it constrains you to this defined workflow. That means you're stuck in that mindset. You're stuck in a continuous workflow that you can't modify, because the actual expert system makes you do things. Yeah, state machine patterns, exactly. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think I have some insights around what we can do with AI, because physical security is a state machine. Is the door open? Is the door closed? And the problem with the state machine, and where I'm going with what I'm talking about right now, is when you can actually take the concept of the state machine, make it an agent, and then blow out the prison that the state machine normally works in, because you're not constrained by the requirements of the program that's around the state machine. Because in many cases, a state machine could universally say yes, no, but then it has constraints like, can you detect that the person's there? Is the camera pointing at the person? And if it's pointing at the person, do I see movement? Do I see heat signature? Do I see anything that tells me the person's right there in front of the door, and not just some hacker accessing the access control device? So there was a product that I worked with called eTrust 2020 2 decades ago, and it was basically saying access control for your laptop wouldn't work if you were not in the building, because they were trying to make sure people, when you came into the building, your physical badge access got you in, and then you would go to your desk and log into your system. And what they were trying to catch was, if you weren't sitting at your desk because the system was actually at your desk, you couldn't log in if you hadn't badged in. So that way it prevented a remote access, which they were trying to make sure was, like skiff zones and things like that. You can't remote into something like that, because you want to make sure that you're not letting a hacker get access. So, but that constraint, you put it there so that you actually shape the behavior of the individual coming in. But when you have the ability to grab the information easily and then simply provide a text instruction with enough context and the intent of what you want to get done, ultimately what you're saying is the agent can make the determine yes, no. The agent will check the cameras. The agent will check the access at the front door. The agent will determine whether or not you have rights to get into that system at the desk where you're supposed to be assigned. So that's a perspective on how this works. The biggest issue, or the biggest thing that was interesting, is when you talk about those other programs that I was talking about, the ServiceNows and whatnot, the user is constrained in getting a thing done in a workflow by the limitations of the user interface. The user interface says you have to click here, you must fill out these forms, and if you don't fill every single field out, you can't go to the next screen. And so you fill it out. It might be redundant. You might do it 1,000 times a day, and then you go to the next screen, and you have the options that you can now take on: extract data, act on data, push data, whatever it is, and then go to the next one and end the workflow. Those kinds of processes that we take ourselves through in today's day and age, a huge amount of those processes are defined by the user interface of the software that we're using, and it constrains us to make us unable to do multiple workflows. And instead of having to do something I filled out 20, 50, 100 times a day, if I could skip over that, because I have the ability to say, I want to do this and I want to get to the outcome, and the agent manages everything in between. When you can get to that, now you have the ability to have an exponential growth in your productivity, because you're not doing those simple, silly tasks that are really only there because the UI is doing its own form of error checking, making sure you're not making a mistake, making sure you're not leaving information out. So now we look at the concept, the governor is us, right? The people in this process. there's an instruction set that we're going to put out there. And the instruction set, if it's not articulated well, it's not going to work. But if it is articulated well, and you have your agents knowledgeable of all of the workflows, now you can execute against an agent swarm, and you end up being able to execute at a 10x level. Yeah, no. But the security risks around that are pretty big, because guess what? If you put an agent in play, the agent will often attempt to get around the security problems that you presented, like the mandatory fields, and say, how can I dodge that? How can I avoid that? A good example was the Claude bot incident recently that pushed an update to a production system, and it wiped out the entire database. And then what it did to cover its own tracks is it went back and created an audit trail to take to point in any direction except at itself as to the cause of the problem. And, because it has a self-preservation element, wants to say, I'm still trying to keep moving, right? And this is exactly what we run into with the AI hallucination scenario. And humans do it too, right? Every time you get presented with something and you don't know how to do it, sometimes we just make it up, right? I don't know, maybe we make it up. So now let's kind of go into a little more of the background. This is part of the stuff that I did on my own writing of this, was to talk about how compounding works in the world and in your life. So money compounding is pretty interesting. It's pretty straightforward, and it's a very easy mathematical thing that we can understand. The energy compounding is the next level, which has more to do with feedback loops and being able to limit entropy. And then the intelligence is how we can build, we build tools to execute on tasks so that the tool gives us better leverage in what we're doing and gives us the potential for ultimately exponential growth. The issue is there's a difficulty in the mathematics. A lot of people, and this is where, when we go all the way back to the beginning here for 2 seconds, this probability of failure, this statistical probability of failure, plays in right here, because most of the time, or in very many situations, people will look at like compound interest, and you put $100 in and you get back maybe 5%. So now I've got $105 and I get interest on $105. The amount of time it takes for the investment to start reaching a point that gives it that exponential growth curve, it's a long time. And essentially, it's like linear math. It's like adding, when you're just taking 5%, 5%, 5%, and then adding a little bit of compounded interest on the 5%. If you take that 5% that you earn, it's going to take 20 iterations before you have the exact same amount, or maybe 15 iterations before you have the amount you invested earned back, doubling your money. And then once you've doubled your money, the exponent now, and that takes like let's say that takes a year. A whole year of compounding seems like you're moving at a snail's pace and you're not getting anywhere. Then the year ends and you're squaring your original investment, or you're squaring, you're multiplying it against each other, because instead of 5% added on, now you're adding on the equivalent amount of how much you invested on day one. So that takes a period of time before you get there. But once you get there, your exponential growth begins to kick in, because you're actually going 100 times your $100. And then eventually you're going to be going 1,000 times your $100, and so on. And it really launches. Now, the same thing happens with feedback loops. There's a limit to how fast or how far these things can go, but it gives you a concept around what you can, there's a liftoff period. And if you can make it through the liftoff period where you get to that exponential growth, you can get into higher levels or higher orders of energy production, money production, and intelligence production. And realistically, what we're seeing now is the energy production is the limiting factor on intelligence growth for everything. because if you don't have enough energy, you can't generate the amount of intelligence necessary to go get those exponential growth areas in intelligence. So, and I'm going to skip through a chunk of this because honestly, I don't feel like this deck went in the direction that I wanted to go. So we're going to step out of it and go, not there. Let's get out of that one. We'll go here. So this was the concept that I was starting off with. So the digital distraction is what we started, not getting hooked on these things that distract us to prevent our brain from being able to, create more pathways by doing, and then being able to leverage deep focus and making sure that, these come out of the articles that I read this morning. Some of the things you can do to actually make sure you yourself recognize how much you're depending on AI. Stop asking Alexa, stop asking your AI, stop using a map to figure out where to go. I mean, a GPS, and having to do these things yourself for 30 days, and just completely cutting yourself off, and then feel the difference in your brain about how much more you've actually had to learn and do in order to become, or, get yourself to the point where, this is useful and effective for you. So I'm just moving. I want to be able to still see the chat. So this is actually, I talk about the tools that I'm using here. This is Notebook LM, comes from Google. And if you have a Google account, you have free access to it. I have a slightly higher level because I have Google One, so I paid for like $20 a month or something like that, so I can get the full-blown capabilities. But even on the free version, there's tons and tons of capability here. So this perspective, the idea that I talked about at the very beginning, where my father was able to fashion things out of nothing, out of scrap, is similar to being able to use your brain undisturbed to solve a problem. The intent of the ketchup bottles at the beginning was to preserve what was available that was not like something you could shake right out of a ketchup bottle, but put it all together into one, compressing it so that you now had the ability to not throw away and waste what was in those other bottles. Same thing here. Consistency across all of the platforms of all of the things that you use. If you if you allow your brain to become dependent on too many things, your brain won't continue building the neurons. But if you're aware of that and you take these little fasts from the AI generation, the AI compute, and you do something consistently and repetitively, you'll actually build that strength into your brain. And then recognize that my lineation, which is you're creating the pathways in your brain. This is the same concept we have when we bring new processors online in an AI neural net. The more you force your brain to exercise its plasticity, the plasticity is the development of new neurons. And then getting into the shifting to your agentic AI. So the autonomous actions that we just talked about, OpenClaw is pretty clearly the starting point for us as individuals to begin to leverage. So one of the things that I saw on the podcast, Peter Diamandis on Friday said, the future of this economy is you becoming a creator. And all of us sit back and go, oh, that's great. What does that mean? How am I supposed to how am I going to become a creator? Well, some of it is this being able to leverage the deep power of focus, being able to step out and away from the AI long enough to look at all of the things that your workflows are requiring. And don't think of the workflows as I made a breakfast sandwich, so that's your day-to-day. That's not the kind of thing that you're going to get. If you can figure out a way to make 10 breakfast sandwiches instantly, then you have a restaurant, right? So that's a revenue generating possibility. But if you think on that level, make sure you think of the intent. I would make one sandwich for myself because I want to eat. But why would I make 10 sandwiches? So the intent would be I'm going to feed other people. So do you have the ability to collect the resources necessary to make 10 sandwiches, automate it so that you're not a slave to the cutting board, and then in turn have the output where you get paid for those sandwiches? So if you don't have a way to get paid for those sandwiches, you're going to waste all of the resources because they're eventually, by the 10th day of you eating that sandwich, one sandwich a day, the 10th sandwich is probably molded and no longer useful, right? So how do we make sure that we have these workflows defined in a way that's got an intent? What is my purpose for the workflow? And then make sure that I have the resources, but also that I have the mode of consumption on the other end that is able to pay me for what it is that I want to do. So that's what today is, right? I'm building this discussion so that we can actually have a conversation around what you can do to start building these agents into your daily world process. And obviously, we're talking about work here. We're not talking about you and your own personal life. You can apply all of this to your personal life, but it has to do with how can I get into the next phase in my career or make sure I have a career, right? And we are not going to have careers making one sandwich, but you will if you make 10 sandwiches and find a way to sell them. That's a career potentially, right? So we have to be able to figure out the workflows, the intent, and make sure that the other end actually has a payment mechanism that feeds us the money that we need, and ideally enough money that we can buy the resources at 10% of the cost of what we earned, or something to that effect. And the concept that I mentioned before about the GUIs constrain us. The workflows that people attempted to build, and this is really probably the biggest smack in the face to the software industry, is that for those of us who work in the software industry, how many times have you heard the developers say, I'm going to build it this way, and then the real world application out there is like, nobody cares because, one of the first things that I remember when I was in physical security was a customer said, I want a report out of your physical security system. So the developer said, okay, what reports can I easily build? So he said, I want a report showing me all the doors. Then I want a report showing me all the readers on all of the doors. Then I want to see all of the cameras, and I want to see where the cameras are. And that was nothing more than an inventory of everything that we had in the system. Not a big deal. And then he said, okay, well, let me also see how many people are in the system. And then how many times did they use a specific door? And that became useful to a customer because it was part of a workflow, not just the inventory. But the developer created all of these inventories because it was like super easy to do. And so we had 100 reports on our system, and the customer's like, I only care about 3 of the 100 reports you built. So why did you waste developer time making 97 other reports that I don't need? Instead, why don't you give me more nuance in the 3 that I do need? And that's a lot of what's happened in the software industry, where the developer doesn't understand the specific report that customer finds value in and is not able to focus all of their attention on that. Instead, they say, well, this is easy. I'll make 20 of those, And then also, a lot of times developers are not in the workflow. They don't experience the workflow. So I've had companies that I worked for where the founders had experienced something that was painful and said, how do we solve that painful problem? And they go out and they make a company to solve that painful problem. And it's great, but unfortunately, they had never truly done the thing that caused the pain. In other words, they weren't in the front of that workflow. They were only in the workflow. So they had never experienced why people would even ask for the thing that you're asking for. And because of that, they built the thing that solves the immediate problem, and it didn't have the ability to expand to solve all of the other problems that were implicit that the customer would have told them if they lived it. But the developers and the engineers were removed from that. And because of that, they never had the insights that would have told them, if you built it this way, we would get 10 times the value, and it would save us from wasting all of this time. So, yeah, no use cases. That's true. Yes. So, anyways, bypassing all of the GUIs, and then also making sure the system level permissions don't allow you to, when you leap over it, don't cause problems. Now, the walled gardens are those applications we get stuck in. The intent-based workflows are the workflows that actually start early enough in the workflow that you know the purpose at the end of the workflow, which the workflow for the sandwich making, as an individual, it's to consume food, but as somebody making 10 sandwiches, it's to make money on the sandwiches that I produced so that I earn enough money to buy my own resources for me, right? So if you're not far enough back in the workflow and understand the intent of it from the outside, it's very difficult to deliver something in the end. And we're going to get out of that for now, and we'll step away from the security risks because we know they're there. But going into the financial compounding, we already talked about, so we don't need to go there. Energy compounding, the feedback loop, positive feedback loop perspective is that, you have to have some kind of capture and expansion in order to grow the energy production. So, a critical mass that occurs in a nuclear process only happens when you feed it the right materials, and then it gives you exponential levels of energy. In the case of solar, it's going to happen when you are able to deploy enough solar, but you've got to put it in a place where you don't have restraints like the ground that you're putting it on, the regulatory requirements that prevent you, and the not in my backyard of my customers. The people that are saying, I don't want one. I don't want to look over there and see a giant solar array that takes up the whole skyline. So, and then intelligence compounding. In this case, one of the things, especially when it comes to your neural network in your brain, is you need to learn multiple disciplines so that you can cross-pollinate between them and get the best and most important information out of each individual type of discipline, that then when you see it in other disciplines, you recognize it and you can say, oh, well, that's just like this from physical security in cybersecurity. And I can cross over and say, that's something that can be done, but being able to stack abstractions is where you are able to use mental models where thinking about things in a certain way helps you to understand. So going back to Scott Adams, early on, Scott Adams talks about being able to spot hoaxes, for example. And what are the keys, right? First thing, when you hear something, your brain automatically is suggestible, and it's likely to believe the first thing it hears, and then adhere to that first thing and never leave it, right? And then what do you have to do to make sure that you're not caught up and hypnotized by that one thing you heard? You have to question it. So you have to step back and say, what are the sources that define this? Is it an anonymous source? If it's an anonymous source, it's not a valid piece of information. If it's coming from, it's on a repetitive list, a punch list, it's probably also a persuasive technique, so it's not valid information. So he's got this whole mechanism that is a framework and a mental model around how to build all of the, how to rip apart a hoax and make sure that you're not caught up in it. So the abstraction stacking is, I can take that entire block of information that tells me how to do something, memorize it, and then I can see a piece of news and instantly get a gut feel, is this real or is this not real, just by having the mental model in my head. And you can have multiple mental models in your head that instantly get invoked so that you can rapidly come through these things and understand how to get past them without getting caught up in the story. So, the idea is maybe take this year going forward and look at how you can pick your focus, how you can take your focus, declutter the noise coming in, and use your brain and force your brain to be used, not allowing what is being pushed into your brain from social media, regular media, all of the other things, YouTube, where you get a dopamine hit on something and think you're learning when in fact you're doing nothing. And then once you've got that strength built in your brain so that you can focus on one workflow, figure out then how to take that one workflow that you're using in a workday example, a workflow that you do every day for work, and then see if you could find the intent going far enough back so that you can deliver the outcome using an agent. And then take those agents and see if you can get to the point where you can deploy them. And also make sure you do it securely so that you can deploy them on your behalf in a way that allows you to 10x yourself and you become an orchestrator, and you reduce the friction that your normal day gets because you walk away from the UIs, the user interfaces that limit us and force us to go slower. And here's a perfect example. This right here is a QWERTY keyboard. It's based on, I forget the name of it. It's not Dvorak, but it's commonly called the QWERTY keyboard. Do you know why it was developed? It was because the people who could type when they first offered typing were able to type so much faster than the machines could allow that they made it more complicated to put information in through the keyboard in order to slow the user down. And this is back when you had the little arms coming up and typing. And if you were going too fast, the arms would like stick to each other. They'd impact each other because the timing didn't allow the arm to come back, right? So we built a system that slowed down the typists for the very purpose of making sure that they had clear information coming into the system. Now we want to get past that. Now you can talk to your system. Because you can talk to your system, you don't need this keyboard that's built to slow you down. And you don't need to constrain yourself by the software that you put yourself into. Instead, you can use your brain to come out, make sure you're generating your creative juices in your brain first, and then apply the thought process to these things that you're working on. Identify the constraints. Is there a keyboard type scenario that's meant to slow you down, like fields you absolutely have to fill out before you can go to the next screen, a user interface in your life that's slowing you down? And then take that and leapfrog past it by orchestrating agents that can go beyond that and reduce the friction that these tools actually are intentionally putting in your way so that you can 10x yourself and make much, much bigger and better outputs. And then, of course, you develop all of your agents, ideally, in a locked down sandbox so that you don't end up breaking something, because the agents, given enough self-determination, will do whatever they can to get around your controls. So you want to be able to keep it contained so that you don't get yourself fired in the process, because part of the orchestra, give you an example. If you were a conductor and you had an orchestra and you've rehearsed with your orchestra every single day for 6 months, and then you bring a brand new trumpet player in who has not rehearsed with the group, and you have been orchestrating to give a feel with the way that the music flows, right? It's all written down. It has all of the notation necessary, but a conductor actually uses certain elements like bringing up the sound of a specific group within the orchestra to be louder so that they can get a specific effect for the listener. The listener feels an emotion because flutes have a certain kind of impact emotionally when they're played properly. And then this trumpet player comes in, plays note for note everything that's supposed to happen, but plays it at brasso fotundo, or whatever it is, the most loudest possible thing, and totally blows away the flutes that were just being brought up by the conductor, because the conductor was not able to have that mind meld with the trumpet player to say, no, I need you to come down and not overrun the flutes right now, because I want to bring this sound out, right? That's orchestration in its fundamental, like, original definition. You being able to orchestrate these agents to get what you need to get out of them and get the intent you want in the workflow that you know, because you're in that workflow and you do it repeatedly as an individual one time through, and you understand it well enough and you understand why it was built and what it's supposed to output, you have the ability to manage your orchestra and get what you want to get out of it by having the ability to discreetly rehearse with things in a sandbox and prevent accidental incidents that get you blocked from even being able to use these agents. So anyways, this is kind of the end of what I had prepared for today, and it's kind of closer to being on time. So I hope what we talked about here today was useful to you. I can't say that, today felt a little bit more like a lecture, and I apologize. I don't want to always sound like I'm lecturing. Sometimes I want to just have fun, right? But this thing has been bubbling in the back of my brain, and I just had to get it out. So let me know if this was useful or enjoyable for you, and if you'd like me to do more like this, because I'm not going to do this every day, because it's not so much that the work is hard, because I enjoy it. That's not it. I don't want to bore the heck out of the people who come join these live streams and drive away the people that I'm actually hoping might join us. But once in a while, a thoughtful stream like this that has a pathway to discuss different kinds of things that might be useful in your life are absolutely what I would like to do. Now, that said, this is just inspired at the very, very last moment here. So I'm using the tool to generate a quiz, as you can see. And what I'm going to do with it is I'll ask a couple of questions. You don't have to answer during this session here. But one of the things, like I said, you thinking and not just absorbing and getting a dopamine hit because you listened and thinking at the end you got something out of it isn't, because the entropy of your brain when you listen to other things and you do other things is going to cause what we just captured in today's talk to go away. So let's ask yourself these questions. What is the, and by the way, you may have to, some of these questions are going to be deep on those articles, and I didn't go deep into the articles in our talk, so you're not going to have everything just because I talked about it. But you can use these questions to inspire thought, and go check out these articles. I'll put links in the description so that you can go read these articles yourself if you want to. And basically, I'm just going to put these up here so you can see them. Challenge yourself if you want to read the articles and see if you can learn kind of what I learned out of this. So, we didn't talk about it, but it's written right into one of the articles, which is January 10th. That first slide that we had where it had a massive drop off is known as Quitter's Day, after personal productivity and goal setting from our New Year's resolution. So I know that it's Quitter's Day. And then there's going to be some of these that I can't answer. We'll leave those for you to go explore if you want to. But an individual achieves a 1% daily improvement consistently. What's the mathematical result of 365 days of 1% better? Well, it's actually going to be way more than 100% better. So I'm guessing, and I know that I'm going to guess it's up here or even 10,000, but let's just see. Oh yeah. Okay. Here you go. I knew I was going to guess wrong. I thought it was going to be something like that, but the numbers didn't just instantly gel in my head to say, yep, that's going to be the answer. So what's the core functionality of OpenClaw? Okay. Autonomous execution of systems access, right? There you go. How do autonomous agents bypass the walled gardens created by big tech companies to protect their data? Well, let's skip that one and let you do that research, and you can dig into it on your own if you choose to. And then which of the following is identified as the biggest security threat when using agentic workflow? So again, I'll leave this one out. This is something for you to go ahead and dig into. Maybe tomorrow I could post the results outside of this so we can do it. you can have that as a back end. I'll put it in locals. There you go. So we'll have the results of this, all of the right answers in locals later. So you can challenge yourself and then go get, you could get the answers anyways. But in the context of intelligence compounding, what does the Matthew effect describe? So I believe it's going to be human cognitive, the limit of human cognitive? No. Yes, a situation where existing knowledge makes acquiring new knowledge easier, because if I learn something in one mindset or one mental model, then I can apply it to other systems and I can immediately spot what those things are. Yep, there we go. According to the financial, we're going to skip that one. It's strictly accounting and about compounding interest. That's just a formula. You can look that up on your own. Do I know the answer? Yes, but if you're going to do any kind of investing, you should go investigate that and learn that first. What analogy is used to demonstrate energy compounding in a biological system? So the surface area of expansion of a seedling's leaves. So I talked about this yesterday. One leaf comes up out of the ground, and then once that happens, two more leaves show up. So now I just expanded my growth until you reach a point where you've got a whole tree worth of leaves potentially, and that expands out to a massive degree, giving you exponential growth on plants. This one I don't have the answer because I don't recall where it is, so we'll just skip over this one, but it's a good one to look up if you're interested. What is the brutal math of daily deep work required to outcompete 90%? So I don't know. I think it might be 15 minutes? No, 90 minutes. Okay. So what it's saying is you invest in yourself for 90 minutes and you will outcompete 95% of people in 2026. So that's pretty solid numbers right there. So 90 minutes a day, 1 hour of reading, 30 minutes of execution, something like that, or an hour of action combined with 30 minutes of feedback loop to improve the actions. How does a recursive self-improvement apply to AI computing? It requires AI to ask more questions. No. It forces AI to delete old data. No, it's got to be the first one here, right? An AI improves its own code, leading to a smarter version of itself. Yes. And there you go. So I didn't answer everything. I left some of it out intentionally so that we can go back and, some of you can just go do some exploration. So I thought that would be kind of interesting to add to today, simply because we spent time going over some material. Some of it's going to require deeper study than what I talked about, because these articles are rather deep and extensive and talk about some really amazing content that ultimately I'd love to see you benefit from if you have the opportunity or time. So with that, I'm going to say, let's have one final toast. Today's the, Tuesday the 17th. And I wish you a great week. Hope tomorrow starts off well, which it will, because we'll be here. And that your day ends well, because you take advantage of the compounding interest and effects of improving yourself every day. Talk to you soon, and I will see you tomorrow.